now, let's look at other stories that have made the headlines. So, the Nigeria's Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, has stated that the projected 2025 GDP growth rate of 4.6% falls short of the administration's ambitions. Instead, the government is aiming for a 7% annual GDP growth to significantly reduce poverty and drive economic transformation. So, he's saying that 4.6% GDP growth is not, is not high enough. So the government is projecting 7% annual GDP growth. So the minister highlighted key drivers of the growth, including stronger revenue performance, increased oil production, as reflected in budget estimates, and savings from the removal of fuel subsidy. He also emphasized the importance of creating a conducive environment for private sector investment. So he also talked about the pivotal role of the private sector in addressing Nigeria's infrastructure deficit, which requires an estimated $100 billion in annual investment. Now, first of all, let's look at the projected GDP growth of 4.6%, which the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, says that it is small, using my words now. It's not ambitious enough. So the federal government is aiming at 7% annual GDP growth. Is that too ambitious? Is that realistic? Let's begin from your side, Doc.
Yeah, I think it's realistic. We've seen in the last 10 years, India had grown at 7%, and so it's not something that cannot be done. But I think the dynamics is what eventually will determine how this will happen. Don't forget yesterday, Bagudu, while on KPMG's interview, had highlighted also the fact that the federal government of Nigeria wants to resort to innovative ways of funding its own projects. And we've been hearing this around in government circles. I remember the Minister of Works also had emphasized that Nigeria has over 3,000 kilometers of road that are begging for attention. And if that has to be done, then of course, government budget can carry it. And so what they're looking at here is that all the bottlenecks that makes it difficult for the private sector to participate in the business, whether it's the downstream or the upstream or the midstream sector of the Nigerian oil and gas, or even in the construction or infrastructure building, the government is looking at removing all these bottlenecks so that people can participate. And what that means is that as long as people are bringing money to participate, that creates employment for a number of people. And as business is evolving, we can actually get to 7% of GDP. I don't think it's a rocket science. But like we have always said on this table, what government needs to do is to ensure that it works really very hard to create the right ecosystem for businesses to thrive. Because the problem actually we have is the ease of doing business. Every other fundamentals are right. But once the ease of doing business is wrong, then a lot of problems will hamper the private sector from bringing in their money into the environment. So we hope that in the days to come, we'll begin to see what government is doing in that direction to really create that environment and that ecosystem where people can do business easily, and foreigners and locals alike will bring out their resource and put into the economy, knowing that the economy is stable and yields and returns prospects are very high.
Okay, let's pick it up from where you left off, talking about private participation in bridging the gap in infrastructure deficits. So the minister actually said that it is not government that would do that. It's the private sector playing a pivotal role. But I want to ask, Ray, how do you think the private sector are going to come into this, investing to also bridge the infrastructure deficit, and then the people will get that benefit? Because if people are putting money, or private entities are putting money into infrastructure, do you think that it will reduce from how people benefit from it, maybe because of the commercial element in it?
Most of the time, when you see private sector participation in any business venture, and they are in connection, collaboration, maybe using the vehicle of the private, the PPP partnership, it's one thing they always look out for is transparency. And whilst the conversation was on, there's something specific that was mentioned, infrastructure. We're told about before we can meet the target of the current administration's 2 million barrels per day production, we'll need about $2 billion to make sure we revamp the infrastructure in oil and gas sector for us to attain that level. That's a lofty height, and quite is going to be a challenge for the government to get that done. Some other things that were mentioned that prevented the private participation, effective presence of the organized private sector in the oil and gas sector is corruption. So when we're talking about putting infrastructure in place, it was there itemized that, look, you do not bring politics into business. By the time you bring politics into business, you give where you make the licensing of oil blocks in the specific areas to be given to political coteries, then that's going to dampen down the participation of the private sector. And things like that to always put up the private sector where you have put on political, or you have politicized the system and you have relegated competence to the background where there are no technical know-how in the whole issue. It's going to take out the private participation completely from the system. And these are one of the issues that were mentioned about. There were also other myriads of corrupt acts that is being perpetrated in the system that were mentioned. And the thing is, will the government, using Wale Edun to tell Nigerians that we can attain 70%? No doubt we can. But do we have the political will to beat down the hydra-headed monster of corruption so that it will pave the way for us to really achieve the goal? That's the question that the government should be answering.
I think government has a strong will to do what it's doing, and that also you can see even in the local participation, especially in the upstream sector of the oil economy. We've seen the likes of Tony Elumelu getting into that sector. We've seen Aradel, we have seen a couple of local initiatives in oil exploration in Nigeria, which before now was not possible. And I know that if you see confidence of your locals in participating in that sector, so the debate is going to become more robust. And I think that's where we are at the moment. And I think that's one of the issues one of our guests was highlighting that day, that of course we're going to see more security, because if you have local participating, it becomes very easy for them to engage with stakeholders, and then we can drive that entire process. And I think that the president is determined to leave a legacy behind. And I think that can be seen in some of the decisions that he has taken so far. They may not be as pleasant as people want to see them, but we see that he has made very tough decisions that, of course, people are saying we are beginning to see some gains in the economy. Because the truth is that if he has to make any significant mark, what we have to see, first and foremost, is increase in revenue. Now, when you talk about increase in revenue and see the projections and everything that is put on the ground, you can see that somebody is working toward a direction. From a 28 trillion budget in 2023, we're doing in 2025. In 2024, we are doing in 2025 a 54 trillion budget. That's almost doubled. So it means that government is making more money, and government is investing in critical infrastructure. All we can only hope is that this trend continues. And as we are able to sustain this trend, you find that a lot of confidence is returning back to the system. People are beginning to believe in what government is doing. But I think where, for me, the core issues are not at the federal level, it's at the subnational level. That the subnationals, the state governments, should be able to complement whatever effort that the federal government is making at the center for this job creation and work creation across the length and breadth of the nation.
Okay, so still on infrastructure. Now, I like that with private participation in road construction, for instance, we can achieve 75% efficiency in terms of road networks, which will save time. Because when people have to move goods and manpower from place to place, if the time of travel is reduced, that means you get to wherever you want to in quick time. that means you're able to move goods in quick time, and then the turnover period is actually reduced so that people can get back their money fastly. Now, on the other side, still on infrastructure, if we look at the power sector, for instance, now, if private entities are to invest in that, maybe one of the conditions would be that they are able to control the pricing template so that they can get back their investment. And at the end of the day, we would then see that the tariff for electricity, for instance, will increase, which will mean people paying way more than they are actually paying now. So it's good for private participation, but I think that as much as there is encouragement for private participation, we should still have a lot of government stake in it, leading to public-private participation, so that while that sector grows, while it functions well, it doesn't become at the cost of the end user or at the cost of the masses. Because utility, for instance, when there's much private investment, it also means that the cost for it will be high at the end of the day. So while you're enjoying power, you may just be paying through your nose. That's just one point I wanted to point out.
Okay.
And then the minister talked about the restructuring of the budget funding. So it says they'll be moving from 80% domestic funding to having 40% domestic, 40% external foreign funding, so that there will be much fund available to domestic companies through the capital market, which I think is a good one. So if the government is borrowing less domestically, it gives free funds, or it makes funds more available for private businesses to access, which is a good one. That
you also note, we did the news yesterday that the federal government is also making about 3 trillion naira available to the Bank of Agric for development of the agric sector. And that also go a long way to see, because one area where we have actually not been able to take so much from is the agric sector. And of course, we're also having now a ministry that is dedicated to livestock, and see how much we can actually do with the livestock. Because there's so much money in livestock.
And we're giving that money to neighboring countries.
Oh, yes. So we need to really invest in that sector. That those who want to play in that sector, government must find a way of addressing the issues that really is affecting that sector, especially for rearing of cow and the rest of it. And I think something has urgently to be done, that this movement of cow along street can help us in that sector. Government must find a way to get some results where we can actually dedicate, maybe in cross states, to see these are places where cattle are. And then, of course, those who are investing in those places, there are enough water, there are enough grasses for the cattle to feed, that then we can actually take the advantage that that industry portends. Because we can see a small country, even like Rwanda, making so much from animal husbandry. If you see the quality of cow in Rwanda, you will be shocked that is happening in Africa. So there's a whole lot that we can leverage. And if, you see, Rwanda is supplying meat to its neighbors, all the East African countries. And then, of course, they retain the hides on the skin for their shoe and leather factory.
Not for consumption as
Oh my God, you can't take it out of Rwanda. It's not possible. I can't even eat it as pomo as you are doing here. It is highly protected because it's dedicated to that industry. And I think that some of these things we need to actually put in place to see how we can make real fortune from this area. There's so much money.
Okay, so when he was talking about this issue of taking Nigeria to the 7% threshold of the GDP, he was talking straightly that that is the level where you will require to take Nigerians out of poverty, which is a laudable step. However, one thing we must see that it has become a norm. And I'm going to go back to the oil and gas sector briefly, because I needed to point out something that is pertaining to infrastructure. And I can say before the current administration, it has become a norm where the refineries were moribund during those period of time. And yearly, we used to churn out $1.5 billion, $2 billion to these refineries for turnaround maintenance and all of that. So, though I would say we are living, or maybe we are left that dispensation for now. However, we require that the current administration audit how those monies were spent, because we are talking about infrastructural development and how these will require about $2 billion or more to make sure that our refineries are in the right frame. Now, some of these state assets and some which are privately owned too that will require the intense presence and attention of the government to revive are even named here. The big ticket projects include the Zabazaba 150,000 barrels per day, Shell Bonga Southwest 225,000 barrels per day, Bonga North project 100,000 barrels per day, Chevron and Seco project 100,000, ExxonMobil's 140,000, satellite field development phase of 80,000 barrel. Now we have not even started talking about the Warri refinery and the Rivers refinery that is about that is more than 200.
So issues, don't mix them up. What you are talking about is oil drilling, the crude. But that has nothing to do with refinery. So what government is targeting is the fact that, yes, our projection for this year was 1.5 million barrels of crude extraction from the ground this year. But now we're already exceeding by 700 barrels. So which means government has actually ramped up
our projection with regards to the budget for the MTF.
Yeah. No, that is the crude production, which of course is the OPEC quota. The OPEC quota for Nigeria was 1.5. Now we have exceeded the OPEC quota at the moment, and government is aiming at.
I was referring to the forecast by the current administration.
Yeah, that is what
not
I'm saying to you. We're not even talking about crude processing, which has to do with the refineries. Now, what they're talking about is the oil wells. The oil wells that we have and the capacity for us to actually drill 2.1 barrel, which is what OPEC used to give to us. And that government is hoping that we can even go up far more than 2 million barrels daily. And what that means is that if we are doing more than 200 million daily, then of course, we will have enough resource to invest in other critical infrastructure. But the beauty here is the fact that government is not driving this process. Government is also enabling private sector to participate in these ventures. So that's what I'm saying to you. People like to we're already drilling. They're already having wells that they are pulling out things from even of the deep waters. So this is good for us that government is not relying on itself alone now, but also is allowing the private to have a participation. And then, of course, my own is once you can create that enabling environment for this private sector participation, we will get the value we want. Refinery working or not working, that's NNPC's issue. Remember, when Obasanjo regime...
Are there issues that we can...
No.
We cannot completely
we
separate
let's not get into the oil sector deeply. When we had telephone issues, Nitel was moribund and wasn't doing anything. And then GSM technology came and a lot of private people entered into GSM. We had MTN, we had what they used to call it, those time, Vodacom, all manners of people came into the operation. Now, Econet then was there, now has transmuted severally to become Airtel now. Now we had MTEL, which was a Nitel owned subsidiary in that sector. It was run aground, but telephony has continued because MTN will not be run aground. That is the beauty of private participation. So you are not leaving it in the hands of government where it's going to be corruptly used, but you are leaving it in the hands of private businessmen who want their profit and ensure that they get results from every single dime of investment that they are putting in.
All right, let's not get deeply into the oil sector because we will do that during policy discourse. But the bottom line here is that for anything to work, for any sector to work, government must play its part. If you're bringing in private participation, yes, it's business, but it cannot be left totally to private businesses to run, else it will just be a capitalist system, and it will reduce from the benefit that the people will get. Now, for government not being able to do business or to run its enterprise, I think that's a narrative that government should be working at correcting. with, and that's where Priya was talking about the willpower to actually tackle corruption. So if there's a willpower to tackle that, government can begin to change the narrative that it cannot run its enterprise profitably. Yes, there's a difference when you have private investors because the volume of money that they put, and because this is private money, nobody wants to see that whoever is supposed to do their job is not doing their job. Nobody wants to see that things are going wrong and they turn a blind eye on it because people feel it is government's business, and so it's everybody's business, so nobody's taking the bull by the horn. But when it's government business, you tend to have negligence. You tend to have people piffering public funds and just feeling it's a national cake.
It's beyond piffering. Government is a social service provider. And by the conception of the state itself, the state is not designed to run business. The state is designed to regulate individuals who are going about their private enterprises. So what state does is regulation. Regulate those who are playing so that the weak are not wiped out by the strong. So that mediation role is what state naturally should play. Because what state provides social service? Now, by the time you now put money to run a social service, you know that money is not going to come back to you. But what government needs to do is to sustain the private doing well so that they can continue to get money to provide their social services.
Okay.
And I think that is the way
but there's something we also consider in this concept of government role in providing just social services. I think that specific concept, we were taught about that specific concept a long time ago in school, and I don't think governments of the nation now are working with that curriculum anymore. Because if you completely shut government out of business, or that the government alone, the terms of reference of the government is just to provide the ecosystem for private businessmen to come and take over the system, a time will come that even the regulatory power of the government will be dictated by these private endeavors. So currently now, as the way the Nigerian system runs, the Nigerian Customs Service brings in money for the government. Even the JAM, the Joint Admission and Matriculation Board, which terms of reference in the first place was not to provide, was not to make profit, is making profit currently.
Those are not
and
businesses per se.
They are not businesses per se. But what we are getting, what the government is getting for that, it is additional revenue to the government, and it is going a long way in attending to public issues and to providing public facilities. So we cannot completely remove government from the business. I think you cannot say, oh, even the way the NNPC operates now, we are being told it's just on paper, or just to say the government is not interfering in the way the NNPC is run, that is as it is now, it's a private enterprise. No, it is running with government mandate, and the mandate that the government has given it is to make profit. So it is a government business.
Yeah, but
let's move on. Let's move on
to is really, see, government has equity in some stake in businesses. We talk about LIG, government has a stake in it, but it's a combination, it's a joint venture between government and private. There are businesses like that where government has to invest and stake some money. Recently, we even had Nigerian government going to invest in European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And that's government stake in it. You put money there so that it can earn some revenue. But it does not mean government is managing those businesses.
Government is not involved in the operations of it, but they may have a stake. Maybe 30%, they have, even in the power sector, government still has stake.
Depending on what it is. It's just a business, and then, of course, they get dividend if these businesses are properly run. And I think this is the way it's structured.
Okay.
All global.
Okay. But what we're saying is that for enterprises that government run fully, government can do this. There are states where we have state transport system. Lagos State is showing that it's working.
It's not working.
It's working. Okay, it's working.
It's not working.
It's working. We may talk about efficiency, but that is not to say it is not working.
Even the buses does not belong to Lagos State. They are privately managed.
A few of them belongs to the Lagos State government. Now, so
we can talk about efficiency.
Few of them.
That it is not working efficiently.
And one of
but
the
that doesn't mean it is not
sorry,
working.
Blessing. One of the problem that the Lagos State government is encountering concerning to that transportation is that they are not working with data.
We're moving on to something else.
The business is not data-driven.
The House of Rep halting the implementation of new CBN circular on ATM charges. This was supposed to commence 1st of March with the new charges for ATM withdrawals. If you withdraw from your bank's ATM, you get to be charged 100 naira for withdrawals of 20,000 naira or less. And then when you use off-site ATMs, you get to be charged 500 naira when you make withdrawals. So the House of Representatives yesterday directed the Central Bank of Nigeria to immediately suspend their implementation of increased ATM transaction charges and the removal of free ATM withdrawals for customers using other banks' ATMs as outlined in the circular that was released by the CBN. So adopting a motion of urgent public importance sponsored by Marcus Onobun of PDP, the House called for the suspension of the policy pending proper engagement with relevant House committees. So this was done yesterday. The decision to suspend that was taken by the House of Reps yesterday. We do not know yet if the CBN would comply with the House of Reps suspension of that charges pending proper, according to them, pending proper engagement with relevant House committees on why these charges should be implemented. But already, this is 12th of March, and this policy took effect from 1st of March. So we've gone almost 12 days into the implementation. I haven't been to the ATM today to know if the CBN has adhered to the House of Rep suspension of the ATM charges, but we'll do that investigation later today to find out if when you withdraw from the ATM, you still get to be charged 100 naira. But let's look at it. Nigerians groaned over that policy, and it looks like the House of Reps heard the cries of Nigerians, and they had to wade into the issue. Doug.
Well, I don't think the House of Reps has the power to suspend the circular issued by CBN. And I think it must also be very clear to the members of the House of Reps that CBN is not a commercial bank, which most of the time they are talking about oversight. CBN makes regulations, and it's supposed to be an independent policy and monitoring organ of government. And I think to that extent, people must be careful what their boundaries are in terms of trying to be very popular.
So this is an overreach?
Yes, for me it is certainly an overreach, and I think it's also a drive for popularity. And I think beyond popularity is the fact that they need to sit down with the CBN, who is the regulator, to say, okay, oh, what's happening? And I don't think it's something that we say, okay, we want to do to become very, very popular. There are a lot of issues here that we are talking about. CBN is trying to manage inflation. Now, CBN is trying to ensure that we are able to control money in circulation. So you need to sit down as a committee to reach out to the regulators to say, oh, why is this regulation coming? And not to suspend an action of another organ of government in your private city. There's a separation of powers. People must understand the limit to which people can act. You can't be interfering in the activity of another arm of government. Because you have your responsibility. Your core mandate is to make laws. You have not altered the laws that set CBN up. So the first issue that you have to do, are there legal issues here that require the attention of the National Assembly? Or is the National Assembly the one managing the monetary policy of the Federation? These are issues that people must separate in terms of running. Yes, there are a lot of people who have complained that, oh, the charges are much. But they also have listed several platforms in which people can do business and actually avoid some of those charges.
So what are those platforms that the CBN has listed? Are there e-channels where people can make
Oh yes,
transactions?
they talk about the e-channels, the USS code, which is almost at free. They talked about internet banking,
The bank apps.
the bank apps, and all these are several channels through which people can make a choice of where they want to do their transaction. So not necessarily on the ATM. And I think it's important for them to even realize, and I mean the members of the House of Rep, without sounding immodest, is for them to also realize that this is another arm of government. Okay. The fact that you have an oversight role to see what they are doing is not to dictate policy measure to the organ of government.
Okay, while it may be an issue of overreach, let's look at it. So the increase in the ATM charges, Nigerians have complained. The House of Rep, through this, is also complaining. So while the House of Rep may not have the powers to be able to tinker with any policy of the CBN, do you think it rests with the CBN to perhaps review the policy because of the outcry regarding the policy? And the channels that are alternatives or supposed to be alternatives, they also come with cost, and they also have their challenges. What's your take?
Okay. So first of all, I think we must equally put into consideration that Section 4, 5, and 6 that establish the executive arm, the legislative, and the judicial arm of government has given them their own powers. And in accordance with this issue, the House of Representatives, the Green Chamber, they are in the right position. They are also the legislative arm of government, part of the second chamber of the legislative arm of government, charged with the responsibility of making law for the good and governance of Nigeria. Now, they also have that responsibility of oversight the federal institutions, and the CBN is not exempted from that with regards to policy. This issue about policy affects the Nigerian on the street, for whom the House of Representatives are charged with the responsibility to make law that governs these people. And if something gets to them that is, a pain in their pocket, or that will bore hole in them, or that is going to worsen or exacerbate the level of their financial spendings, I think it is in the right place for the House of Representatives to step in to do that. And the House of Representatives will not step in to do that by dictating to the CBN. I don't think they're in a position to dictate. So if there is anything that I think the House of Representatives would have done is to probably invite the CBN governor or any of the top officials that is saddled with that responsibility so they can have this conversation. Okay, so if we cannot suspend it at the moment, can we still bring down the price? Maybe that's a conversation that would have been solved on the table. However, when Mr. Olayemi Cardoso was asked a question on why this introduction, he made, I remember vividly 2 points that he made. One is to incentivize the banks, and 2 is to make cash available. Incentivize the banks and make cash available. Okay, how do you mean incentivize the banks? You mean they are not making enough profit? That you want to give them who gives incentive to the Nigerian that save in commercial banks that is called a savings account, and you do not have anything at your disposal? And he went on to say, look, if you cannot withdraw because you feel your bank ATM is not in front of your house, and the one in front of your house or your vicinity is that of another bank's ATM, in order for you to avoid that 100 naira charge, you need to go get another ATM, so that it will be comfortable to you. Then that ATM that you are going to get and apply also, it doesn't come for free. It comes with a cost, charge, almost 1,000 naira. It's almost 1,000 naira.
Over 1,000
then you are going to have to maintain that ATM card, maintaining that of your banks too, with other several costs that comes across with it. I think the House of Representatives is in a justifiable position, not only to suspend it, however, to also call any of the officials, top officials who have the capacity to act in that place, to have a conversation that can bring respite to both parties.
Okay, so let's look at this. Suspending, maybe what should have come first is the proper consultation or engagement with the stakeholders, which they are going to do after the suspension. Because I do not think that the suspension would hold, and that's why I said earlier that...
Oh, it has to hold.
You can't say that it has to hold. It depends on the CBN now. It depends on the CBN now to either comply or say you don't have the powers to interfere or give us instructions what to do.
No, both of them belong to the same tier of government.
Hold on.
So they
Hold on,
the same tier.
You do recall.
I
This
know.
is legislative.
Yes,
So
yes. But the
recall
legislative arm
the
of
cash
government... So
scarcity.
sorry.
Hold on. You recall the cash scarcity period?
Yes.
There was opera. There was talk about let cash be available. Did anything happen? We've seen, because the CBN is the apex financial institution regulating...
It is under law.
Yes.
It was created by
Yes.
the law.
Yes.
Laws that were made by the House of Representatives and the
So
Senate.
maybe consultation should have happened first with the CBN, and then we now know what's going to happen. So there could have been escalation at that point after consultation to say, okay, this is what we have.
This is what we are getting wrong here.
Hold on, Pri. This is what we want to do. Because I do not think that the CBN would adhere to it. That's why I say we're going to check.
That would be to empower lawlessness.
We're going to check for today,
And
for tomorrow,
a motion in the House
if that
does not
suspension
constitute
works.
a law, Pri.
No. See,
Listen
Doc.
to me now.
Wait just a moment. I wanted to come in first. Wait.
let's
No,
wait.
Just let me.
in the
It
House
is not
is
just.
a law.
It just. It's not a
let's hear
motion.
his
Does
point.
the CBN, all ministers of the executive arm of government, before you become a minister, you go through parliament to become a minister. You go through screening of parliament to become a minister. It is also a responsibility and a constitutional right for the legislative arm of government to summon a minister and even to someone to invite Mr. President to come and explain something that has to do with policy direction.
So that's
now,
the
if that is not done, so if they have the responsibility to do that and they feel that your minister, or in this particular case, the CBN governor has brought out a policy that requires some form of explanation, that requires that it should be halted at the moment so we can rectify other issues that are begging for attention. It is a responsibility and it is a right constitutionally given to the House of Representatives. It is not unwholesomely meddling. It is not meddling.
These are two things that you said.
A motion on the floor of an assembly is not a law.
Is this a motion or it's been told that the CBN...
motion.
It is
Listen,
not a motion.
It's a motion. It was a motion raised.
A
and
motion
then
is not
they
a law, and it's not
concluded.
a judgment that must be complied with. It's an appeal. So it's left for the CBN. If they want to make it a law, they make it a proper act, so they can pass it into a law.
No, that is
All
not it. See,
let's
a
move
policy of the executive arm of government does not go through parliament, so it does not become an act of parliament. Now, the House of Representatives has every right to stop and halt, suspend any policy by the executive arm of government that does not come through parliament. And if any just a moment, because we have to demystify what a policy is and what a law or an act of parliament is. This particular case, why the CBN went ahead to increase this fare, it does not go through. It's not a law that should be enshrined in the act. In the act that established the CBN as the regulatory power of the banking institutions. No, they are wielding their powers from the same act.
Which law is
which is
CBN
a
breaking?
policy. Yeah?
Which law did they break?
The CBN has not broken any law. However, the House of Representatives has the right of oversight, which is constitutionally enshrined, to call them to order. And that is what they are doing. They don't need to pass a parliamentary act for them to rectify this. No, this is a simple and small case.
This is it.
Yeah, what you should understand is that the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria set up 3 different arms of government. You have the legislature, you have the executive, you have the judiciary. And it is done in such a way that one of the organs cannot interfere with the running of another organ.
So what is checks and balance?
Yeah, the checks and balance.
Interference is different from checks and balance.
Yeah,
and
so
this is checks by the House of Representatives.
You've had your say.
If you have
Let
to
it
do
happen.
a check on somebody, yes, they have the right to summon the CBN governor to appear before them, to tell them why they needed to do this, and ask him to come to the floor of the House to defend it. And it is the place of the CBN to say, this is the policy we are taking and for the interest of the nation. And I don't think that you can raise your hand in the floor of an assembly to stop an act of
it's not an
another
act.
Hold on, please.
It's not an act.
activity. If you don't understand what act means,
No,
activity
I understand.
of another
It's
agency.
not an act. It's
Okay,
a
let's
policy.
not belabor
that is
this.
policy.
Let's not belabor this.
You
Please.
cannot
Let's
use
not
your
belabor
hand
this
raising
issue.
in the National Assembly to stop a policy of another arm of government.
You can.
You cannot.
They have the right. They have the constitutional powers.
No, they don't.
Oh, they can.
Let's
They
not
can.
belabor
They
this
don't.
argument.
They don't.
It is because the National Assembly did not stop Tinubu
This is
from
not-
that
this is not- this is
Naira
not-
design
this is
with
not-
it. Because they didn't stop him.
Hold
Does not mean they do not have that power.
They don't.
They
They
shrank
don't.
Let's
back.
not belabor
They
this.
don't.
Let's not belabor this.
They don't.
So this is the point as making, that you recall what happened during the Naira scarcity period. Even when the Supreme Court gave a judgment and insisted that the old Naira note was legal tender, we found that using old Naira note was a problem. So there is one thing for even a law or a judgment to be given. It's another for that to be complied with. So if the Supreme Court had even given judgment that the old Naira note remains legal tender, yet we saw that for about 6 months, it was difficult being able to use the old Naira note in Nigeria as legal tender because of the challenges people had using it, and even with the banking system.
No,
So-
the banks did not reject it.
Were you able to use
The
old
banks
Naira
did not
notes
reject
within the
it.
banking
After the
system?
verdict of the Supreme Court,
Were you able to use that?
after the
Were you
verdict of
able
the
to
Supreme
use that?
Court,
It was a
if
challenge.
you say Nigerians
No,
did not
it
do
was
it,
a
you can
challenge.
say
It
the
was
see,
a challenge
what-
at that
what
time.
The
Now, I
problems
said
that
that
time.
to say this. I said that to say this. Now, while you said two things, being able, the House of Rep, being able to call the CBN governor and any minister to ask questions, yes, they can do that. But to place suspension, that's where the question is. Is it over?
you saying they don't have that power?
Is it? No, I don't think they can
do they
suspend.
derive the
I don't
power?
think they can
Constitution.
suspend. I don't think they
Can
can
you cite
suspend
a section
the
of that Constitution?
They can suspend any policy
Section
of the
4,
CBN.
5, and
But
6
they
of the
can
Constitution
interrogate.
establish the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. And one of the powers of the legislative arm of government is that they have the right to make law.
Yes.
And they have the right, when they have the right to make, they are only the arm charged with the authority to make law.
Yes.
No organ of government make law. The executive arm makes policies that does not necessarily need to go through parliament. If it wants to make law, it is called an executive an executive law, law that will be sponsored in the House, which will be, of course, the political party
All right,
that
not
is
to
in power
belabor
will
this.
sponsor that
We'll
on the
wait a few days.
House. Now, this is a policy. A policy
You
doesn't
said
need
that
to go.
over and over
No,
again.
okay,
We
because
don't
I
need
need
to
to make
No, you have made your point. You need to get
No, that is not just the point I want to make.
No, we're out of time. We're out of time on this.
Why are you guys talking about making?
You have made enough points on this. We're just laboring this issue.
Stupid argument.
So,
We need to go on a break right now.
Does the law empower the executive to also go and tell the legislature how they want to decide their bill? They don't.